Well, look, we're already seeing the impact of warming globally. That there is increased flooding, there's more food and water insecurity, there's mass displacement of people. This is going to be equally. As you see, Pakistan is particularly vulnerable. The projected temperature increases in Pakistan are 1.2 Celsius higher than the global average. Pakistan is facing the irreversible damage and threats with above average mortality from floods, from storms, from droughts. There's 1 billion people globally at risk of losing their homes, and the majority are in developing nations equally. As you see, Pakistan is particularly vulnerable. The projected temperature increases in Pakistan are 1.2 Celsius higher than the global average. Pakistan is facing the irreversible damage and threats with above average mortality from floods, from storms, from droughts. There's 1 billion people globally at risk of losing their homes, and the majority are in developing nations. So I think it's in Pakistan's self-interest to take action now on climate change. Let me give you how we see it through the Unilever lens. We've been in Pakistan since 1948. There's a Unilever brand in 90% of Pakistan's households. It is the 5th largest population in the world, as you well know, with a rapidly growing young population. But the future success is reliant on climate action. We believe that there is still time for Pakistan to take action, but like all great challenges, this will require partnerships and collaboration across sectors: government, the private sector, civil society, academia. Across countries, climate change does not respect national borders. This is one where working collaboratively across borders is critical, and across time. This is a multi-decade effort, and we want to see Pakistan at the forefront of this effort. We applaud today's initiative. This is a country rich in historic, cultural, natural resources. It's so worthwhile protecting Pakistan.
Absolutely, this is music to our ears, but more importantly, for large organizations like Unilever, with the kind of footprint you have, I believe not just 90% Pakistan, but a majority chunk of the world population are your customers, are your consumers. So is there really a case, an economic case for sustainability, or is it at best still an idealistic dream?
Well, I think if you believe that growth, cost, risk, and talent are important considerations for business, then you bet there's a business case. I mean, let me give you a couple of examples. Our vision at Unilever is to be the global leader in sustainable business, but to prove the link to superior financial outcomes. That's what it will make it sustainable for businesses to pursue sustainability. Now, what we've done is we've integrated our business strategy and our sustainability strategy. We call it the Unilever Compass. There are 38 specific sustainability commitments within that. Let me pick out 3 big ones. The first is on plastics. We've set some very ambitious targets for less plastic, better plastic, more recycled plastic by 2025. We've committed that not just in our company, but through our value chain, all our suppliers, everyone will earn a living wage by 2030. And we've committed to be a net zero business by 2039. Now, one interesting move that we made was we wanted to test, is addressing our carbon footprint and climate change something that our shareholders care about? So we were the first company to voluntarily put our carbon transition plan to a shareholder vote. We did it as an opportunity to proactively answer investor questions and see if we had a mandate for the plan. And we were a bit worried, our board were worried about what our shareholders would say. Would they say you're not going far enough? Would they say you're going too far? And the answer is that our carbon transition plan squeaked through at last year's AGM with 99.6% shareholder approval. So this is not just something that we believe is good for business, it's something that our shareholders have said is good for business. So I hope that gives you and the conference all the more encouragement to aim high and take action now for a brighter carbon neutral future for Pakistan.
Right, translating within the organization.
Let me give you three quick thoughts on that, Sidra. The first is to always resist this trade-off thinking, this idea of it's a choice between a climate-friendly business or a financially successful business. It is not purpose or profits, it's purpose as a pathway to better profits. So it's so easy to fall into the trap of this being of trade-off thinking, which it is not at all. Secondly, the business case is becoming clearer and clearer. There's a generational effect here where older consumers truthfully don't even claim that they adjust their purchasing behavior based on sustainability considerations. But if you want to appeal to the generations of the future, I'd strongly suggest that companies think carefully about their social and environmental impact if you want to appeal to consumers of tomorrow. And the third is, there is an interesting ambition loop between the private sector and government. What we're finding is that as businesses step up and make stretching commitments to their carbon footprint and their climate actions, it is emboldening governments to go further and reach higher, which in turn is likely to create the policy conditions for business to be able to deliver on the commitments that they're making. So once again, we come back to this point about how important it is to have a cross-sector, cross-country, cross-year approach.
The knowledge gap which is there. Do you feel big businesses like Unilever has the role and an important responsibility large be aware of positive climate action? Maybe in countries like Pakistan or other developing countries, you're not getting the kind of societal push.
This idea that somehow consumers in Scandinavia and Germany care more about climate change than consumers in Pakistan or Brazil or China is not factually correct. We have the data because it's people in your country who are living with the immediate threat of climate change. It's people in the developing world who are finding themselves displaced from their homes, whose crops are failing, who are experiencing the adverse weather effects. So I see this as, if anything, there will be more consumer demand, more consumer interest in the developing world than there will be in relatively better off and more insulated countries in places like Western Europe, North America. Secondly, there's of course a standard, a normal distribution of companies on our commitment to addressing our carbon footprint. We firmly believe that leading companies, companies that you're going to have on, companies like IKEA and Unilever, have a role to play, but I wouldn't describe it as a role of education. I would describe it as a role of setting high standards and role modeling how it is perfectly possible to have high ambition on our carbon footprint and deliver strong financial performance. And one of the mantras that we try and encourage as all companies is to measure your carbon output, set goals. It doesn't have to be the most stretching goals initially, but have a goal and report against it. Just those three steps of building the muscle to be able to measure your carbon footprint, setting some kind of goal, ideally a net zero goal, but it doesn't have to be, and then having the discipline to report against it, annually or in your annual reports and accounts. Those simple steps are how to get moving.
Interesting thought, because more often the public perception is that yes, while we realize the significance of climate change, the pushback or the demand from the society is not as critical as the developing world. But you've corrected us factually that is what you're getting, what you're hearing is contrary to the popular public opinion. But Alan, what are the best global practices your organization can perhaps offer to Pakistan for better capacity building? I mean, some of these problems are fairly new, and of course there is a need for capacity building. What can we learn?
Well, let me really just focus on two areas that have been very important for us, which is energy and agriculture. we made a very early commitment that 100% of the electricity used in Unilever's operations around the world, all our offices, all our factories, all our distribution centres, all our R&D labs would come from renewable sources. We set the goal of having that done by 2020. We achieved it in 2019, and that shift actually saved us an enormous amount of money because renewables came down in cost much faster than we expected. So a simple action that companies can take is to look at energy source. The equivalent for government, you heard the Minister talk about, it is absolutely critical that governments set goals and commit to renewable energy as a critical part of dealing with the carbon footprint and climate change. But the second is agriculture. Agriculture is a major contributor to carbon emissions, and the work we're doing on regenerative agriculture.
And more importantly, what I heard.
I've been invited by Alan, my dear friend, to say a few words to your conference, which is around such an important topic for all of us, for the generations to come. But let me start by just recognizing that we are all, of course, in a very challenging situation in the world right now. This is a situation that after 2 years of pandemic, other calamities and issues that we've experienced, with now the conflict going on in the world, is something that, of course, is deeply concerning for each one of us. At the same time, I'm incredibly proud to hear that you continue to stay focused on the climate change. Because we have to accept it is the duty of our generation to be able to manage several different challenges in the world. And climate change, even in the short term it might not look like it, is possibly the most important existentialistic crisis that we have to resolve together. Now, I had the pleasure many years ago to live and work in Karachi, Pakistan, between 95 and 98. It was a very exciting period for myself, coming from Sweden, no experience of IKEA, no experience working in Pakistan. It was probably the most at the premium, will anyhow be for the few. We need to build an economy that is for the many, and as such, climate smart needs to equal cost smart and business smart. I would be stressed today if I didn't know that we in IKEA were on the forefront of cracking the code of materials, of circularity, of energy, renewable energy, of smarter ways of doing mobility. I think perfect business sense. And any sort of conservatism that might be putting the wrong business at risk. So again, morally right, brand-wise right, and economically right are the reasons why I strongly recommend. Going forward. To invest, but also knowing the big heart from all my friends and all my memories from being part of Pakistan. I'm sure that today you will not look for excuses, but you will look for the reasons to lean in and make sure that you're not second, but actually in the forefront of the next industrial revolution, which is a climate smart revolution. I wish you all the best of luck and hope to see you one fine day. Thank you. Shukriya.
Good. So let's hear how the goodness in terms of being around here for all the stakeholders actually ties up to the present reality and the present subject of climate change. We have with us the CEO of Standard Chartered Bank.
Bank in Pakistan. And through our 160-year history in the country, we've lived up to our brand promise of being here for good. Being here for good, among other things, means taking on today's biggest challenges. Challenges like climate change, which we are all gathered here today to discuss, but also other challenges, such as lifting economic participation and resetting globalization to help create a fairer, more equal, and more sustainable future for all. Well, like many emerging markets, Pakistan faces disproportionate risks from climate change relative to its own low level of emissions. The increased variability of monsoons, receding Himalayan glaciers, more frequent floods, droughts, and heat waves pose substantial threats. This is why we applaud the level of ambition that Pakistan has set on climate action and its focus on progress during this decisive decade. Its plans to reduce emissions, going 60% zero carbon by 2030, and invest in nature through initiatives like the 10 billion tree tsunami project, the Ecosystem Restoration Fund, and the Recharge Pakistan initiative are very encouraging. The desire to lead, to work together, and learn embodies the spirit of this event and session. So how can we support this decade of action? Well, first, I'll add my thoughts alongside the other panelists on why large businesses need to take positive climate action. Then I want to expand on some of the considerable opportunities that we see for Pakistan. Alongside government action, like Pakistan's National Adaptation Plan, businesses can and must play their part in the fight against climate change. If the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us anything, it's how susceptible we are to global emergencies and the fact that no single actor alone can be successful in preventing or managing them. So we need renewed collaboration efforts and shared innovation between the public and private sector.
It's a pleasure to join you today. I want to thank Unilever and the Overseas Investors Chamber of Commerce and Industry for organising this incredibly important event, particularly Mr. Giyas Khan, OICCI President, Mr. Amir Paracha, Vice President, and Mr. Mohammed Abdul Alim, CEO. I also wish to express my gratitude to Unilever and its CEO Alan Jope in particular for their outstanding climate leadership and support for COP26. Today, the courageous people of Ukraine are at the forefront of all our minds as the world unites against the Putin regime's continued illegal invasion and bloodshed. Yet, though this immense and immediate danger is the international community's priority, we know that the chronic threat of climate change remains. So I congratulate Pakistan for the climate action it has taken, from its 10 billion tree planting program to its ambitious NDC, including a target to produce 60% of power from renewables by 2030. And we were delighted to welcome the Pakistani delegation to COP26 in Glasgow, led by His Excellency Mr. Malik Amin Aslam. And we are keen, of course, to continue to support Pakistan in making the clean transition through initiatives such as the Energy Transition Council. I also commend those businesses in Pakistan taking action on climate. Over 20 companies in Pakistan have joined the United Nations Race to Zero campaign, committing to reach net zero by 2050 at the latest, and to short-term targets to get there. This is absolutely vital. Business is at the heart of the transition to a clean global future for two reasons. Firstly, because to deliver, we need change across the real economy. And secondly, because governments need to know that business backs bold climate action. So those of you with us today will play a pivotal role in the future of our planet, just as companies did when the world met in Glasgow last November for the United Nations Climate Conference COP26. Almost 200 countries, including Pakistan, came together and agreed the Glasgow Climate Pact. And this is a historic agreement, which, amongst many other things, calls on countries to phase down unabated coal power and phase out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. It also requests countries to come forward this year to revisit and strengthen their 2030 emission reduction targets as necessary to align with the Paris Agreement. Outside the COP26 negotiations, we heard commitments from countries, from businesses and finance that support the ambitions of the Glasgow Climate Pact. More than 100 countries, Pakistan amongst them, committed to cut methane emissions by 30% by 2030. Leaders from countries, including Pakistan, representing around 90% of the world's forests, committed to halt and reverse deforestation. And chief executives from 30 financial institutions committed to eliminate investments linked to deforestation, including Aviva, Schroders, AXA, Fidelity International, and East Capital Group. The First Movers Coalition was launched at COP26, through which companies committed to use their purchasing power to spur clean technology development. Founding members include Nokia, Agility, and Engie. And new corporate members joined the Powering Past Coal Alliance, committing to accelerate the move away from coal power. And these include TransAlta and Mott MacDonald. All in all, As a result of what we achieved at COP26, we kept alive the ambition of limiting the rise in global temperatures to 1.5 degrees centigrade, which science tells us will avoid the worst effects of climate change. Keeping that 1.5 degree limit alive is vital for the future of our planet, and particularly countries most vulnerable to climate change, countries like Pakistan. Already, Pakistan is feeling the effects of a changing climate with extreme heat and water availability plummeting. Thanks to the commitments at COP, we can say with credibility that the 1.5 degree limit lives, but its pulse is weak, and it will only survive if we act now to turn the commitments into action. So our absolute focus for the UK's COP26 presidency year is delivery, and we are urging countries to honour the Glasgow Climate Pact and to turn targets and commitments into clear delivery plans. And we're determined to deliver progress on adaptation, on loss and damage and finance. But we also need business and financial institutions to honour the commitments that they have made and to take further action to clean up the real economy and show governments that business is behind a clean future. Doing so is not only good for the planet, it's good for the bottom line. The clear message coming from Glasgow is that the global economy is going green. Net zero is one of the clearest economic trends there has ever been and presents an enormous opportunity. Yet, it also creates risks for those firms that do not move with the times, and they're in danger of being left behind, trying to catch up as the world goes green around them. So I urge all of you here to act. Join the United Nations Race to Zero campaign if you've not already done so. Advocate action across your supply chain, using your purchasing power to create change. And I know Unilever has taken action here. Encourage your suppliers to set 2050 net zero targets and commit to eliminate deforestation from your supply chain. And make the case to governments to deliver on their commitments and take ever more ambitious action. In short, please be a force for good, a force for the planet. Together, let's seize the opportunities presented by the clean economy. Let's make 2022 a year of delivery and continue to keep 1.5 alive. Thank you.
But this particular yes, let's dedicate ourselves to making 2022 a year of delivery and keeping our commitments towards the end goal, which is the 2030 NDC commitment that we have as a nation. Ladies and gentlemen, as we come to a close of this conference, there are several people that we'd like to thank, and these organizations, without their support, without their partnership, the depth that has been brought to this particular conversation, these conversations would not. Ladies and gentlemen, some organizations that have really helped us, they're worthy to be mentioned here. We'd like to specially mention the STPI that helped in the climate research and helped to produce the white paper. If somebody would like a more in-depth analysis of the conversations we've had, please feel free to take up that. This is a public-private partnership in achieving Pakistan's nationally determined contributions committed at COP26. We'd also want to be acknowledging our very appreciative and grateful for the role WWF Pakistan played for their generous support and the use of their nature-based content that has been across the event. KMC Parks Department that, of course, each one of you by being here is making a difference. And now as we move towards the most awaited presentation of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, we were really hoping our next speaker to be here in person as our closing speaker, but unfortunately he's tested positive for COVID, but we're very grateful that although he didn't have the energy, I believe that the OICCI is also putting together a very effective committee that will continue to engage.
Congratulate the OICCI Chamber of Commerce and Industry for taking the initiative to organize this Pakistan's climate conference today. I'm glad to see that Pakistan Climate Change Conference has brought together experts, investors, all the key stakeholders that are looking at various aspects of climate change. This is such a huge problem that the World Economic Forum has said that the rise in temperature is going to affect the world's GDP through crop decreasing, increase of disease, and the coastal cities can be very badly affected. They estimate that the cost could be as high as a colossal amount of $23 trillion of the world's wealth could be wiped off. This is a colossal amount and an amount that certainly warrants greater attention. There is even talk that 18% of the world's GDP will be reduced. And obviously, how can this world not pay attention to this important subject? It is also concerning that maybe South Asia may be the most affected part of the world. And within South Asia, Pakistan itself will be very badly affected. So we have to pay special attention. So I hope that this conference will make us all aware and to come forward with solutions. We have made a commitment at the Glasgow conference that we will pay attention to this. We're going to talk about reducing, having cleaner energy through wind. We're talking that we'll start moving to electric cars. We want to start bringing out greener cities. So there is a lot to do, and I'm so glad that this conference is coming up with some solutions to this very important challenge that we will face around the globe. Thank you very much.
Co-create value. Special video recording of a talk that he'd like, especially for the Pakistan Climate Conference. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, please welcome this special. That was our closing note for the day. I hope that your takeaways from this conference are going to be insightful, and of course the application of that in not just your daily life, but also your organizational lives and your roles as leaders is going to be, is going to be impacted by it. But ladies and gentlemen, one little correction I'd like to make. Sometimes you get a false negative, sometimes you get a false positive in your COVID test. I would like to reassure you and to deliver the good news that Mr. Abdul Razak Dawood Saab is not COVID positive. It was Alok Nath who was COVID positive. I had a little mix-up. So this particular false positive was brought to you by Sidra Iqbal. But once again, thank you very much for being here. I would like to once again reiterate the role played by our partner organization. Once again, would like to formally thank SDPI, WWF Pakistan, the KMC Parks Department, and of course, and most importantly, the OICCI